Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming again to our show, Digital Transformation Podcast. This is the second episode of the second season. Also today we have a lot of guests and we will talk about a very hot topic, and it is Agile transformation. I want to start by introducing our guests. Again, thank you for being here today with us. We have Mr. Peter Preston, co-founder at Agile Marketplace Advisors and ex-Atlassian Senior Product Marketing Manager. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
Then we have Matt Zembruski, Agile Coach and Advisor at Agile Game Changers. Welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. Excited to be here.
And Cliff Berg, co-founder and managing partner at Agile 2 Academy, also author of Agile 2. Welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Michelle.
And as always, we have Mr. Cyril Coster. Thank you for coming again. And
my pleasure.
Frank Italia.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so let's warm up a bit with some questions. I will start by asking you, Matt, what do you think, which are the first steps that you should take to start Agile coaching in a department, in a company? Is there any differentiation according to the size of the enterprise? And how do you usually do that?
Well, it's a great question. There's a lot to unpack there, but I'll be brief with my answer, and we can elaborate if we need to. It really depends on the size of the company, the size of the organization that's doing the Agile transformation, and what their experience is so far. If they're brand new and they haven't had a coach there and they're just standing up teams, then the approach is really to align with leadership as to how they're going to start to roll this out. And are they just going to roll out with one coach, with one scrum team, and then expand it from there? Are they going to do more of a big bang approach, which I've seen all these happen. The big bang approach can be a little scary, but it can also give them a lot of progress at once, massive dose of change. An example of big bang is where you have 1,000 people in a particular business unit or part of an organization, and they all shift over to Agile at once. So you set up everybody with 8 to 10 person teams, and everyone has a scrum master, and then you go get a whole bunch of coaches in there. If it's a bigger bang approach, you definitely want to have some more preparation and alignment in advance. If you're going to start, meaning that the coaches get together with the scrum masters, with leadership, and you organize your approach and how you're rolling it forward. If it's very small and it's more of an organic approach, and you're going to start with one coach, which I've been involved with too, with one scrum team, that tends to work very well also. And that there is a smaller approach. And what that is it's the coach would align with the scrum master and with leadership and would talk through, okay, where are we at now? Do you need some basic Agile training, how to stand up the scrum team? Do people already have the basics? And then you lean in from there and you just start going. The bottom line is it depends on the situation, but as far as the opportunity goes, you want to do some planning, but not too much. In general, you want to roll up your sleeves. Agile is about delivering small pieces of value very frequently and getting fast feedback loops. So you don't want to overthink it and you don't want to overplan it. You want to do some of that and then dive in based on the size of the initial implementation.
Okay, great. And is there any way that you use to measure their Agile understanding initially? What is your way to understand that? You mentioned a planning. You mentioned that initially you make some questions, but I'm really curious to discover more about the methodology itself.
Yeah, again, it depends on from my perspective. I'd be curious to hear the other perspectives as well. A lot of I know Peter has a lot of experience with Jira and Atlassian. By looking at the so you can do it more organically, again with a coach. Working with a team and having a session with them and just sort of seeing where everybody is. Again, that's one coach with one team. If you're starting small, that's how I would do it there. I would introduce myself to the team, work with the Scrum Master, and then say, okay, what do you know about Agile? Okay, we need some basic understanding of the events and what's a daily Scrum, what's a retrospective, etc. And then as the coach / Scrum Master, you can start to provide some information on that. If you're trying to do it a wider survey type thing, then it's really good to understand when you're working with leadership, is the organization already have a tool in place, such as Atlassian Jira? Is that already in place? Are they already measuring their work, measuring their success, and they just need to sort of move that into an Agile model with a Scrum or Kanban framework? And then it's understanding from leadership in the organization, okay, how much Agile experience or knowledge do the teams have, the development teams or delivery teams, as well as the Scrum Masters have? Like, how much knowledge and experience? And if leadership usually knows the answer to that question, but if you want to get a more data-oriented approach, you can send out a basic survey and sort of just do some questions. We've done this too, where you send out a survey and you understand where is everybody at, because usually it's a mixed bag. Usually there's people at this day and age, 20 years ago it was new, but at this day and age, it's usually a mixed bag where there's some people on the team. Oftentimes it's not the Scrum Master, but there's one or two individuals in the team who have a good amount of Agile experience. They know what's going on. And then what you want to do is you want to be able to lean into that and leverage their experience and knowledge as you're growing the team, because you're going to grow these team units. You're not growing individuals specifically as much as you're growing a team.
Okay. Thank you for your answer.
And just to rebound on what Matt just said, Peter, I would like to get your experience about implementing Agile in marketing teams. Of course, Agile comes from IT development, and I'm very interested, and I'm sure that the audience too, it's how do you implement successfully Agile in a marketing department?
Well, first of all, I'm flattered that you would think that I was successful. So as Matt was talking, I was reflecting on a few instances where smaller companies, so smaller teams, sort of, as you touched on, typically the development side would be working Agile and the marketing side would be doing what marketing does. It's very campaign based, not necessarily in lockstep with the product or the development teams. And so I've been through it a couple times where we've attempted to get into the same rhythm as the product teams, and I will say to varying degrees of success. One story that comes to mind was at a smaller software company here in Brisbane, in Australia. The product and the marketing teams were very separated, like even physically on different sides of the building. And so the ways of working were equally as separate. Product would work through Scrum. They would have their daily stand-ups, and we would see this all happening sort of across the building. Like literally, you would see it happening. There was an area where the team would meet every day. And I think about maybe 1 or 2 months after joining that team, we started to talk about, should we be working the same way that the dev team is working? And we didn't bring in anybody from outside, but inside the company, there were a few sort of, I guess you would say, champions, like Agile champions that volunteered to help us take baby steps. So I wouldn't say that we adopted Agile fully. Small team, young team, hadn't really seen this before. So there was a lot of, the initial sort of setup was just to read up on it, talk to your counterparts on the dev teams and the product teams to see, like, what is a Scrum? What does a sprint mean? How long are sprints? What do we expect to deliver from these things? And then we took that back as a marketing team and kind of decided, what would we adopt from that and what wouldn't we? So it wasn't a wholesale approach. So we weren't doing everything that the engineers were, but we did start having stand-ups. We did keep a backlog, and that aligned a lot better with the the development team. And as I'm sure everybody knows, product always delivers exactly when they say they're going to, right? So we never had any issues with our marketing getting out of line with delivery dates. But all kidding aside, it did help us a lot to get our messaging, our campaigns better timed with actual release dates with the product and dev teams.
Okay,
Excellent.
and I have a question here. So how does the interaction and communication among the teams work in that case? I just want to explore probably the concept. So most of the time, the marketing team might be involved in some operations, okay, that might touch the tech team. So in that case, how did you coordinate the interaction between the teams?
We actually moved our desks. So I mean, it almost sounds silly, but we started to co-locate. And at first it was just one of our team members would spend the day sitting amongst the engineers. And even it sounds silly to say it out loud, but would literally just sit next to them and listen and sort of just be around. And then we started going to their stand-ups, and half the time I may not understand what's happening because I'm not the one. I know enough. I'm a bad enough developer that I can get in and break things, and that's about as good as I am. So I understood generally the direction that they're going, but not always everything that was happening. But it was really just about being in the same space and having those conversations, which I know is kind of one of the major components of Agile is having those conversations and being a bit more directly engaged. So it went from a lot of, we use Teams. So Teams, despite the fact that you're sitting in the same office, you'd be communicating via Teams and literally just going and standing next to someone and having a chat and encouraging more coffees and just literally being around each other. That was, I'd say, the most helpful thing that we did.
No, actually, it's extremely interesting because I used to call this contamination. Making sure that two different profiles that are working in two different expertise area can just from time to time talk and understand what is going on. That is already a lot, actually, because people don't talk that much. Just have an idea what is going on sometimes makes a big difference. And starting and at least initiates a cooperation among teams. Frank, I know that you have a question.
Actually, I wanted to ask Peter, why do you think Agile methodology hasn't been pushed harder so far on marketing teams? Do you see any big obstacles? Any reasons, particular reasons for that?
That's a good question. I think, so at Atlassian, I was in the product marketing team. And prior to that, so the same company that I was just talking about, the smaller company, it wasn't called product marketing. It was just a marketing department, and it was basically the engineers sat over there, marketing sat over there. And I think at Atlassian, what I got to experience was a closer relationship with engineering and product. So we kind of naturally started working in a bit more of an agile way, similar to what the dev teams were doing. At the previous company, I won't name it, so I can talk about it fairly candidly. I think the marketing leadership didn't see that as something that needed to happen. So the marketing team has our objectives, we have our goals. We want the product team to deliver when they say they're going to, and that's about as much as we need to know. That's it. So I really think it's just kind of like a legacy mindset. We don't need to work the same way. And what really came to light for me at that same organization was we needed to be embedded. We needed to start working in a similar way. Again, we didn't adopt like Agile as a whole, but I think we took the parts that made sense for us. And I think to some degree, we have less control over, we being the marketing side of things, we might have less control over, say, how our messaging goes out. And especially at larger companies like Atlassian, you've got to work across however many products. And that means for every product, there's a marketing team. They're all trying to send emails. They're all trying to schedule ads, social posts, etc. So I think that's one reason why it might not be adopted as readily, is that there's a bit of a bottleneck. We don't want to flood the market with 15 different messages all at the same time. So we have to maybe slow our pace down on the marketing side, which I think doesn't lend itself to the agile sort of methodology as much, because it's hard to say for a marketing team, we've delivered what we said we're going to. Now it's up to someone else to make sure that it goes out. We tend to want to own those things and see that through. So if a sprint's done, but we can't actually ship our work, we'll hang on to that until we can.
Cliff, for people that are into the agile space, the discussion between waterfall and agile is not even more a topic at all. Okay, let's be honest. But unfortunately, in large enterprises, this is still, something that is happening now with the management and executives that eventually keep thinking waterfall, or a whole company culture that has been waterfall so deeply. And then eventually an innovation hub or just a part of the teams that try to be agile and to perform the transformation itself. Okay, but I'm extremely curious to understand more about agile too. Actually, I would like you to explain it to our audience and let us understand a little more about it.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So, just a comment on what you said, which is very correct about waterfall. But I'd like to point out that what waterfall means changed. During the 1980s, I was on a lot of projects that on paper were waterfall, and they were extremely agile. In fact, they were the most agile teams I've ever been on in these waterfall projects, because there was a requirements phase, but the requirements were treated as a first cut. And there was a design phase, but the design was treated as a first cut. It was like a stake in the ground. And then there was a development phase, and during the development phase, the design would evolve. So it was very agile, and we did massive automated regression testing every night. Completely automated, no manual testing ever on these teams. We worked against a backlog. We talked every day, immense amount of collaboration. But anyway, with regard to your question, which was, what specifically is your question? You're saying why is it hard to deal with organizations that have a waterfall process and get them to be more agile?
Yeah, exactly. So I would like you to comment this part that seems to be one of the bottlenecks into the digital transformations nowadays. I'm not saying it's McKinsey, it is Forbes. Everyone is reporting that more than 75% of projects on a yearly basis are failing in the digital transformation space because of tech challenges, of agile challenges. And I also would like you to tell us if Agile 2 can actually be the next step, okay?
Well, the Agile 2 team was put together right at the start of the pandemic. And the reason that was the golden moment was because it was evident that the common Agile practice of everybody being in the same room, it was evident that you actually didn't need to do that, and for some people that's very effective. For some people, it's actually destructive. It depends on your individual neurology. People are different in that regard. For some people, sitting with others is very energizing. They communicate verbally a lot. They exchange. They kind of develop an emotional momentum, and there's a lot of exchange and ideation. But for other people, being near others kind of blocks them. It actually keeps them from being able to focus, and it blocks their creativity too. And so, that the dilemma there is no right answer because it depends on the individual. And so it's not clear what we should do. But, but anyway, when the pandemic started, it was clear that there was a core Agile tenet that had evolved, which is not in the Agile manifesto. It doesn't say you should all sit in the same room, but somehow that became this accepted norm, this team room. And if you Google that, if you Google open plan office, you find page after page after page of how people hate it and don't like it. But somehow in the Agile community is like, oh, you have to do that. And so we realized the Agile community wasn't really listening. My editor at Pearson, I've written 2 books through Pearson Publishing, and my editor, his comment was that the Agile community was extremely insular. And we realized that when we put the Agile 2 team together, which was 15 people, and we decided a priori it was going to be global, multicultural, and represent the range of expertise that we thought mattered. So me and a colleague, we actually we created a table of the skills and the requirements, because someone had to have a lot of deep experience. And they also had to show that they were not invested in the status quo. They had to show that they think for themselves. And so we put together people with experience in product design. That individual actually worked at Google. Experience in leadership, experience in system engineering, experienced in human resources. One of the people on the team is a founder of the People Ops framework, which is a modern interpretation of HR, kind of. But anyway, so we put the team together, and we also realized that one of the dysfunctions in the Agile community is that even though the manifesto begins with individuals and interactions, it somehow became all about the team. And, I don't want to denigrate that, because the team is really important, but so is the individual. You need to grow a team. You also need to grow individuals. That's called adaptive leadership. It's an important leadership function for people in leadership roles to grow other leaders and to help people reach their individual potential and to build individual relationships with each team member. You actually are leading a group of individuals. You're not really leading a team. And the way people relate, for example, there have been studies that show that some people react very negatively to servant leadership. They don't want someone to be like empathetic. People vary, and so you need to, a leader-member exchange theory tells us that you need to find a way to bring everyone on the team into the inner circle. And so we realized that we needed to take a broader perspective. It's not just about the team, it's about the ecosystem, and an ecosystem of many teams. And you mentioned, Peter mentioned that the marketing has lots of initiatives and there are lots of products and everything, and it's all a big ecosystem, lots of things happening at the same time, and they intersect. It's not all aligned. It's not a value stream. It's lots of intersecting value streams with different goals and different timelines. And that ecosystem is composed of teams, and they're composed of individuals, and it all matters. The whole range matters. And so we realized that Agile 2 really had to start with the ecosystem. First and foremost, it had to be about the ecosystem and everything within that. And so we stepped back and we started as a retrospective of what was working and what wasn't working. And it was deeply informed by 4 fields: leadership theory, behavioral psychology, cognitive science, and operations research. And there's huge amount of research. And this is what my editor meant about the insularity. There's so much research on this, on leadership and all those things. I have a folder of hundreds of papers about leadership, of studies. So we retrospected on what was working and what wasn't working, and we distilled that into what we called key ideas. And then we differentiated those into kind of positive and negative. Like some ideas were problems, like here's a problem, this is not working. Other ideas were like insights. We really need to do things this way, and from that, we distilled that down, and we ended up with what we called principles, which regrettably sounds very prescriptive. I prefer in hindsight to use the term kind of like rule of thumb or like just reminder. Reminder would be great, a reminder, because you can never have a true principle with human behavior. There's always an exception. So at best, like the Agile Manifesto is really a set of reminders, not rules. For everything in the Agile Manifesto, there are cases where that's wrong. So it should be reminders. And we ended up with 43 reminders. And then we thought, is that too much? Maybe we should, like Heart of Agile or something, distill it down. And then we realized, no, because then you lose the essence. You lose the insights. If you distill it down and make it too abstract, it's no longer useful. It's not actionable. So we kept it in its original form, and we provided the thinking behind each one so that you can read it. It's like in law, there's a concept of a preamble. Before the law, there's like the background. Why do we need this law? What problem are we trying to solve? And that's actually the golden part. That's actually the more important part. What's the reason for this principle or this reminder? Because then you can read it and say, oh, I see what they're getting at. I see, so their principle, it doesn't really apply for me in this case, or maybe there's a good idea there, so I'll use it a little differently, but it's a reminder, something to think about, and then you have to figure out what you're going to do. The worst use of so-called Agile methods is to copy. If you copy, you don't know what the heck you're doing.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I usually say that you touched a lot of points. I usually say that you start from the book to build what works for your team, because it doesn't make any sense to do the other way around. Otherwise, that will be probably a process that takes too long. It might actually not bring any benefit in the short term. So why not looking at extreme programming, at Kanban and Shuari, and eventually the classic Scrum or Crystal, and take all the practices that we like the most, and that we know that for our individuals, for our team can work the most. That is something that I like a lot. And a funny thing, that there is a guy in Lasting Dynamics that tells me, one time told me, Mike, you are the only one that can talk with him, referring to another engineer. And why? How is that possible? Because you, of course, have different people in front of you, so you have to know how to talk with each of them. There is actually one engineer that literally becomes crazy when someone tells him that there is a bug on something, and instead of bug you call it a tweak, then it works like a charm, and you have no problem at all. And why this happens? Because if you investigate what they're doing, they're spending a lot of time to actually optimize and make it very good. So when you define like a tweaks, a bug, that of course makes them defensive, so individuals but that need at a certain point to sum up to be a team, because the performance needs to be evaluated on the whole team. So we succeed as a team, we fail as a team. That's the first thing that I usually always say. I really appreciate it. We can come back to the topic later, but I really want to move to the content, because we have a lot of funny videos today that I want to discuss with you. And we found also a lot of funny comments on these videos. So let me share my screen and we can start. Okay, you should be able to see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, so the first one is probably my favorite. I'm going to briefly describe it. There is a lady that invites everyone to become a Scrum Master because it's so easy. It takes only 1 week to get the certification. You get paid quite a lot. You can work from remote, and actually you don't need to have any technical background. This is probably the reason why Agile teams fail. But I wanna show you. It's super funny. Let's yeah, here we go.
3 reasons you should become a Scrum Master. 1, look, you don't need any formal qualifications. I've been telling you guys this. 2, you don't need a technology background. 3, you can get your Scrum certification in less than a week. So what are you waiting for? And let's not forget, most jobs are over 6 figures. And majority of the jobs now are work from home, remote. Yes.
Okay, so the video is probably funny, but this has a serious implications into the agile space and into the tech world. I would start with you, Matt. What do you think about it? And is this one of the having a good Scrum Master? Is this one of the classic challenges as an agile coach that you encountered?
Yeah, it's what makes the video really funny is that it's based on truth. It is very true. Everything that she said in there is true. The no experience part is the part that is the least true, I guess. Yes, you can start with no experience, but it's challenging to start. And at the end of the day, once you get hired, you need to deliver value, right? So this is something I'll just say, what's not shared in this video is if you don't have experience and you step into it, you want to have, there's what shows up on the resume, which is what people think about as experience. Like this is your LinkedIn profile, this is your resume, all the tangible things you can point to. That's what most people think of when it comes to experience. If you're weak in those areas, you can still plug into what she's talking about here and still get a Scrum Master job. But you want to be very high in the other areas, the things that are not on your resume, such as the EQ. Like how good are you with the interpersonal reactions? Cliff was talking about individual interactions and how important that is. And you were mentioning, Michelle, about how certain words set people off and certain words enable people and empower them. And because everybody's different, we're a whole collection of billions of individuals in this planet, right? So, but my point is, what she's speaking to are the hard skills that are on the resume, which is true. You can be weak in those and still show up and become a Scrum Master. It's a lot harder to break in because companies need to take a bet on you. And I'll tell you right now, the good companies who are really aware, such as your company is really aware of like, what does Agile mean? What type of people do we want in these types of roles? You're not going to be fooled by somebody without experience and with a low EQ. But if someone is super, super high on the attitude and the energy and their ability to relate to people, but they're weak on the hard skills, then they may be worth taking a bet on. So anyway, I think it's a very entertaining video. It certainly is one of these things that a lot of people goes viral these days because of the way it's presented. But it's actually based on truth. So there's a lot of truth there.
Yes. Okay, next one. This is also extremely interesting. Probably Peter is already aware of this video, but probably all of you already saw them. And let me briefly introduce this one. This is the wrong way of doing a team structure. Okay.
Yeah. I really like this one.
Chet Wrong here with the wrong way to do Agile. Today, team structure. First, make your product owner and your Scrum Master the same person. They basically do the same thing anyway. Always put the boss on the team. That keeps developers motivated. Of course, teams should consist of people with complementary roles from different parts of the company. But if budgets get tight, feel free to leave out QA. If everyone does their job, then QA is not important. And that's the wrong way to do team structure.
I like this series because they really took like the worst questions you can have on typical questions from the leadership or from a client. And they made these great videos, quite entertaining. And really love the way that, typical questions from a client, they say, oh, can we cut the budget? Do we really need a Scrum Master? Why can't the Scrum Master do the PO job or, someone else in the team do the PO job, etc.? And yeah, the funny side is, yeah, you always cut QA at the end because you don't have the budget. That's also something that typical that you see typically. Peter, is it your experience at Altasian?
Well, put me on the spot there. So I would actually say it's not QA that gets cut. It's the marketing that doesn't actually get a seat at the table most of the time. Yeah, so there's a spicy take. So that was a fight that I had regularly was, invite me to the meetings, please. So I do appreciate this video though, because they really committed to the pant size, which we'll see in a moment when they combine Scrum and Product Owner. That's a fantastic outfit. Yeah, so it does ring true to a degree that certain teammates are left out, but in my experience, it wasn't the QA, it was me.
Interesting. And what do you make of having the boss turning to the meeting rather than the reviews? Well, what is your view about the positive or negative influence that someone from the leadership team turning up in a ceremony?
I think like my experience with that has been very different at different companies. So on smaller teams, when the boss showed up, it was usually sort of an inspirational thing. Bigger companies, it kind of went the other way because you tended to see the boss less, right? And if they showed up, it usually meant someone's maybe in trouble, or maybe are we going the right way with this? And so you get a little bit nervous when the boss walks in the room like that.
Yeah.
And so smaller teams, I think the boss tends to be a little bit more integrated in the first place and knows what's up. And then bigger teams, when all of a sudden, the shadow sort of appears on the glass door. That's the face that everyone makes.
It's funny because what you just said just remind me of my experience on this. I was like a head of product for the redesign of Carrefour, so a big, the second biggest grocery retailer in the world. And one day, no one told me, but the CEO just turned up. The CEO just turned up on the floor, and it's like, gosh, I haven't prepared anything, so you just like go through a little bit of what is on the board extra. But it was funny, exactly as you described, the energy in the room. So it was a huge open space with like maybe 200 people. The energy in the room completely changed when you just turned up like on the floor. That was really really interesting. And I agree with you also on the fact that the smaller team tends to have a different dynamic, and the boss is there as more an inspiration and a drive rather than you need to deliver something good, great, or this is your objective for the year. Absolutely.
I think there's a few things to that. One, I think I'll just touch on like the CEO showing up. There's always that sort of approach of just pretend like I'm not here, which of course is impossible.
You can't.
Act like I'm not here. Sure thing, right? Like so that we're all acting naturally now, right? And so that never actually comes to be. But I do think it's just getting to that the last part there, the team dynamic among small teams. I think it's just that when you have smaller companies, smaller teams, that boss is a bit more involved anyway, right? Like they're closer to the decisions because they don't have 5 products that they're overseeing and 25 teams, and the pyramid, the hierarchy isn't as big, so it's just naturally easier, I think. Even if your boss isn't the CEO, if you have a sort of the head of a stream of products, even that role can be intimidating, I think, showing up in a meeting, announced or unannounced.
And briefly, that's a question for the three of you, but it's a comment based on what Matt said during the introduction. Is in your view, and really just like a short answer, do you need to coach the leadership first or the team first? just really, I'm really interested to have your views
Yeah,
on
quite a good
this
question.
question.
You want us to just jump in, or are you gonna?
Yeah,
ask-
go ahead.
Please, please.
Oh, okay, well, I'll go. I hesitated. I assume we'll all get a chance to give our, I feel very strongly that, it's fundamentally, these are all leadership issues. And when I say leadership, I don't mean the leaders. I mean the activity of leadership. Leadership is everything. If the boss shows up and people suddenly behave differently, that's because, as Peter pointed out, in a large organization, bosses tend to be responsible for lots of things, and there's a lot of politics, and they're concerned about optics. And so they spend a lot of their time outside of the team. And so when they show up, people are afraid because it's, why are they here? And if the team isn't used to interacting with them, they might not know what to expect. So it's fundamentally a leadership style issue. It is possible, we did a study about a year ago, my company, of 5 highly agile companies. And one of them is led by a very controversial figure. And I just want to say at the outset, I don't like everything this person does. I don't like the stuff he tweets. But SpaceX, founded by Elon Musk, is the most agile company we've been able to find. The most agile company. And we wanted to understand why. And there's a lot in the news, micromanagement. It's not true. He does not micromanage. And we read everything available, watched all the YouTubes, and then we talked to people. We talked to people who had worked there. And what happens is what he does, and he's established this as a cultural norm. And so the other leaders do it too. And what he does is he goes around and asks questions. And he doesn't boss people around. He doesn't. He goes around and says, okay, how's that going? Oh, interesting. Have you thought about this? Oh, okay. And then he might make a decision. Here's what we're going to do. Or he might say, okay, and walk on. But he doesn't bully people. What we found is that got embedded in the culture. And there's a great quote, I don't have it here, but there's a great quote from one of their managers who was there from the beginning, who talks about how Elon Musk created that culture of asking questions and dialectic discussion, issue-focused discussion. And so when a person like that shows up, you're not afraid. I had a boss like that back in the 80s, and he's agile. And he would come to my office every day because he'd make the rounds and talk to each person. We had offices, believe it or not. And he'd come in, how are you doing? And he'd ask me not only what I was doing, but how I was going to do it. And this gets to Peter's comment about how people need to know, Peter said he knows enough tech to be dangerous. Well, that's enough, but you do need to know it. You need to be able to have conversations with people in other areas so you can understand the whole picture. And this guy, Carl, would come in my office and say, how are you going to do it? How's that going to work? Explain that to me. And he was just interested. It wasn't like intimidating. How's that going to work? It was like, oh, interesting. How's that going to work? How are you going to do that? And you could say, I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet. And he'd say, oh, okay, I'll see you later. Or if you explained it, you'd say, interesting. Have you thought about this? And by the way, you might want to talk to Joe because he's working on something related. But I'll see you later. He didn't tell you what to do. He would just, and when he left, you felt like this really interested, helpful person had just visited. So when he showed up, no one was intimidated. He could have come to a stand-up if we had stand-ups. We didn't. Everyone would have welcomed, oh, great, Carl's here, because he has great ideas sometimes. So the fact that someone's a boss is irrelevant if their leadership style is supportive and has a good impact. It's all about their leadership style. And if someone has authority, they can misuse that by intimidating people, make people afraid. They can also use it to help things, to make things better. So it comes down to leadership style.
Yeah. Well, I would say that for me, it's a little more in the middle, the truth, in the way that how do you grant a certain efficiency and productivity without having these old 90s styles of be bossy and, and bully with your employees, and promoting agile culture and the framework on a whole company scale. And this is probably why companies like Sunrise, Accenture, since 2017 have been embracing a SAFe, that is the scaled Scrum approach, to make sure that they could coordinate, and work as a small teams, but still have, a overall roadmap and grant efficiencies. So the question is, okay, definitely, I understand that dinosaurs companies on the market will pay this sooner or later, because there is no other, other outcome. Yes, political games and whatever, connections, but sooner or later, the innovation is gonna wipe them out. And what happens instead to the small companies is that they have to fight hard to truly be agile, but still, catch up with the revenues and have a certain productivity. But where is the truth? What is the right way to be in the middle? That is always, the big question mark, the big question for every company. Probably doesn't really depend on the management and on the leadership. It probably strongly depends on that, but it's not only that, no, because otherwise that will be, every startup probably would be extremely successful, no. So I tend to believe that there is still something to discover into the agile transformation to make sure that. But let's look at the next content that is also very interesting. It gives us probably one more topic for the conversation. This guy is negotiating. This is another funny video. It's negotiating. It's a PM versus engineer, how to perform estimations, probably in a total wrong way. Let's watch it.
How quickly can we get this done? 10 days. No can do. We need it faster. Then you'll need to cut scope. How about I add another engineer? 15 days. What if I remove an engineer? Depends who. Bob, 12 days. Sally, 18 days. Steve, 5 days. Done. Kiss on it. Kiss on it.
Kiss on it is epic. Legendary, I would say.
Sometimes the best part of these videos are actually the comment from people. There is a comment that says everyone has a Steve in their team, and if you don't know who your Steve is, then it's probably you. And now I'm concerned because I'm trying to think who the Steve in my team is, and can't think of any. Moving ahead, Cliff, how do you explain the concept of self-organizing teams when you have to sell the agile methodology to a new company that is not adopting it? How do you actually pass that message that team can self-organize themselves?
Well, I love that you picked me, and I feel guilty because I talked too much already. But I'll be really brief.
We are inverting, so don't worry.
Okay. So self-organization isn't what I would view as an outcome. I think it's the wrong thing to prescribe. I think it's the wrong way to start. It's where you want to end up. But it's kind of like a doc, go to a doctor and the doctor says, be healthy. What are you going to do with that? A doctor should diagnose and see what's wrong and then help you to do things to become healthy. To get to a point at which people can self-organize well, they have to have collectively fairly high EQ, and they have to be operating within a fairly constructive, regenerative culture within the ecosystem. So if just telling them to self-organize is like setting them up for failure. There are a lot of studies. If you take a group of people and just let them self-organize, it doesn't go well. What happens, you know, the Agile community often talks about the Tuckman model, which is one model, the team behavioral model. And in that model, you know, people eventually get to a stage at which they're I forget what it calls it, performing. Yeah, okay, and the Tuckman model is performing. But what often happens is within a team, if there are two kind of what we think of colloquially as alpha personalities, they will butt heads and one will win. And then the other one gets silenced and their little following, usually alphas have a following, they become subdued and they don't contribute that much. And now the team's performing, but it's not performing well. In order for a team to organize well and be really effective, you have to cultivate positive forms of leadership within that group of people. You have to look at the individuals and see how they are, and you have to work with individuals, you know, and so it's, you know, self-organization is the wrong thing to focus on. The right thing to focus on is the interactions and the health of the interactions, the behavioral psychology viewpoint, and really the techniques. There are leadership styles that are really helpful. There are different kinds of leadership that you can use within a team to spot problems and to get them to operate well. And I said I would be short because there's a lot to this. There are a lot of leadership models, and we could go into that in behavioral psychology. There's a model which I love called trans-theoretical model from behavioral psychology about how to change things. But, you know, this is that's a long discussion by itself. I want to hear what some other people think.
Yeah. Matt, do you agree? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, these are all good points, and I agree in general with the theme here, which is the answer is usually it depends. It's very situational, and what Cliff just shared is exactly right in a lot of cases. If you just go in and say, and you treat everyone as if they were a mature, agile mindset, agile team, agile company, but they're not, then you're going to be in trouble. You're just like, oh, go in the room and self-organize, create your team, you know, pick a scrum master. You know, go set up your first sprint. That's going to be a mess, right? I've seen that done. I've seen it done with great coaches and great scrum masters, and it works. And there is a certain amount of letting go that you want to do as you go through a transformation. But we're talking about agile transformations. Digital transformation, another thing that gets a lot of buzz these days. But agile transformation, it's a transformation. It's a progression. You don't start and it's just overnight you're there. So you have to really meet the team, meet the company, meet the organization where they're at, and then go from there and address it appropriately. You're asking about leadership and the balance between, do you start leaning into, a few minutes ago, do we start leaning into leadership first, or do we start leaning into the team first from an agile coaching perspective? And it relates to the recent question as well, is I usually view it as a balance. Again, it depends on the situation, but normally, a good, healthy way for that to proceed is the lead coach or the coaching organization would partner with leadership and get initial buy-in. Like, okay, do you want to do an agile transformation? Do you just want to do it with one team, multiple teams, etc.? So you do a very rapid buy-in, like, okay, this is what we want to do. And then the leadership normally, not the agile coaching organization because they're new, but the leadership would, in a healthy organization, would then communicate with the team or teams and say, hey, this is what we're planning to do. Let's discuss it. Let's align on this. Let's get alignment on this. Let's get buy-in. So you get buy-in from leadership first, then leadership will get buy-in with the teams or team, and then the coaching organization or coach can come in, and you've already got buy-in now all across. And then the coach there, I would say a good rule of thumb is the coach at that point or the coaching organization would then spend in the beginning of a transformation about 80% of their energy with the team and the teams. That's just from my experience, what I've seen, and about 20% with leadership. And ideally, you're growing a really strong base of scrum masters and agile leaders within the organization. The coach's job is not to stay there forever and always be the conduit. You want to grow the team. You want to grow, especially the Scrum Masters and the Agile leaders in the organization. So as the coaches start to pull away, the team can be stronger and continue to grow. So those are some thoughts.
Great, great. Okay, Peter, I want to discuss this other video with you, but before watching it, my question is, does your team, first of all, use your ex-team use Jira, and eventually how many customizations you have been conducting on the basic setup?
Oh, so first part, yes, of course, we used Jira. We used Jira Software and Jira Service Management and Jira Work Management, and all of the above. How many customizations? Let me see, on a case by case. Not many, because we're a bunch of marketers, right? So it was mostly out of the box, and there was some tinkering that happened, but less on the team projects, more on individuals just seeing what we could learn about the product, really.
Workflow. Let's start from the workflow, because I really want to understand more about this topic. Workflow, the classic to-do in progress done, or did you add any other status into the equation?
We had so different levels of that across the team. We had, say, at the team level, we maintained a team board, and in that we had a blocked column, and then I think we had a review. So a few things like that shoved in there. I will admit, we weren't very disciplined about it. We did not have a Scrum Master or anything like that. So we were self-organizing, and we probably shouldn't have been. So to go back to that last question, that was, we were left to our own devices, and we made it our own. Yeah. So the small tweaks, but nothing major.
So the reason why I'm asking is because the next video is about, it's another funny video about story points, okay? And it will be nicer to understand if your team added any custom field, and now you will understand the why custom fields. But let's look first, let's watch first the video.
Okay, we've got some new people here today. So let's go through the story point scale. We use the standard 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 Fibonacci sequence, but it's important to understand how we think about each of those levels. Maverick, let's start with you. I like to think of user story complexity like a skateboard, bike, car, or bus. So something really simple would be a skateboard, and something a bit more complex would be a bike, and so on. We usually use blueberries, plums, grapefruits, and watermelons, but yeah, that's the same idea. That's great. Well, I can use blueberries too, no problem. Oh, fantastic, Maverick. How about you, Leon? So I think of it like each point is about 3 hours of development and an hour of QA team testing. So a 3 would be something I think I could do in about 9 hours with up to 3 hours of testing. What the fuck did you just say? Oh, wow. I thought you said you had Agile experience. Yeah, I do. It's just easier for me to think about work I'm doing in terms of time. I've never done anything that takes 1 blueberry, but I've done a ton of stuff that takes a couple hours. This is horseshit. Okay, let's all calm down. I'm disappointed too, but let's work through this. How about we take an example story, Leon, like this one, to change the word forever to uppercase in the terms and conditions page. What do you think that would be? It's done. I just did it. Whoa. We can't just do work without planning, Leon. Should I put it back? Well, how about you estimate how long it would take to put back?
Okay, that's like the extreme, of course, totally hyperbolic, but definitely extremely funny. So it's even harder to ask. Did you ever have experience estimating with the skateboards, blueberries, and watermelons? I mean, yeah, okay, t-shirt sides, and there are a lot of ways, but coming back to the point and trying to be a little more serious, sometimes sticking with the book creates embarrassing situations. I do understand the value of abstracting the layer and do not use the time to estimate tasks as per Scrum, book. And I'm totally fan of the Fibonacci sequence and use it as something that gives you the size, the complexity of the task, of the user story eventually. But literally, what is the right approach when you have in front of you people that are too much, following the book, or eventually they totally ignore what it is about, So these are two extremes for me that can be dangerous. But how do you usually leverage, the topic in order to arrive to a concrete setup that works across the teams? Peter, let's start with you, and then we can hear everyone.
You're asking the wrong guy. There was a going joke at a few companies that I've been at that one in particular that so we use t-shirt sizes, and then the question typical of marketers, because we use different vendors for our swag. So was it the t-shirt size from Printful or Printify because they ran different? So because that medium was pretty big, so then you get into exactly that meeting and no one was taking it seriously. And then inevitably on the marketing side of things, everyone just goes, I don't know. We have to send it to email. And if they don't give it back to us in time, then it's a large. And if they do, then it's a small. So it's very much like, was it Leon that just made the changes? That's inevitably what would happen on a meeting. So I've got no good answer for you. Marketing teams are not.
It's actually a fantastic answer. We are trying to analyze the problem from different angles, and the marketing angle is extremely important. So, Matt, what do you think about it?
Yeah, this is a great, very entertaining video, and it's funny. I love the fact that he updated the forever, and it was done before they even talked about it, because that's what I get into a lot with teams. Is a lot of times they're spending so much time estimating and planning and thinking, whereas the doing part of it would be so short. And Agile is about doing and having a bias for action and then getting the fast feedback on that, even if you do it wrong. So if you're estimating something like that and it's that trivial, don't even estimate it, just do it, put it into the test environment and put it into next release. So anyway, there's a lot of funny things in the video. In general, though, you're asking about the estimating and the planning and so forth. The t-shirt sizes I've seen work very well for larger than stories like epic level or initiative levels or things that are bigger. The Fibonacci tends to work well with the stories and with more of the team level units of work. With that said, though, we're talking about one of the themes we're talking about in this podcast is the individual interactions. And I'll tell you, I've seen all different things, and the backlog refinements or the conversations about estimating work best with the teams that have really strong relationships together. They're really functional teams. I think of a Scrum team or a Kanban team like a family. And if you have a good family unit and everybody has each other's back, they understand each other, they can finish each other's sentences because they have that type of relationship, that type of openness and trust. It doesn't matter whether you're using t-shirt sizes or blueberries or watermelons, it's going to work well because they're all going to know when to stop talking, when to just give the best guess, and when to move on. Because otherwise, the interpersonal conflict, unspoken or spoken, ends up just bogging down the entire event and costing a lot of money in terms of time and energy. So again, my summary statement would be, it comes down to the individual interactions and relationships. And if you can make those better and better and more mature and more functional, then you're going to be in a better shape no matter what you use.
Yeah. Totally agree. Cliff, what is another problem that I see from all this content, that I found online, and of course, in any company, with every company that we have been working with, there is a total overlapping of Scrum with Agile. Agile doesn't mean Scrum, and not the other way around. So I do not understand why. So story points, for example, is the way that Scrum uses to perform estimations, because there are other methodologies that do it completely differently, or eventually do not even do it at all. Okay, or do not give any precise indication of that. So historically speaking, in your opinion, why at a certain point people started to think that Scrum is agile?
Yeah. Well, you know, I if there's time, I'd like to amplify what some of the stuff Matt said, because I think it's spot on. But to answer your question, you know, so two things I'd like to talk about. One is answering your question about the history of how that happened. And the other thing is about what Matt mentioned about the team interaction being more important than the estimation. You know, about the first one, you know, I watched it happen. You know, in 2000, I was 20 years into my career. And at that time, I was CTO and co-founder of a company that by that time had grown to about 200 people. And we built things, and we built very sophisticated back-end transactional systems for big companies. The stuff really worked. We had our own performance lab that we built on our own dollar, and we did everything fixed price, you know, so we really had to know what we were doing. And when the Agile Manifesto came out, it was like, this all makes sense. This is good stuff. You know, it wasn't anything we didn't know. It was like a reminder of what really works. But then the friggin' Scrum certification came out, and it completely derailed the Agile movement. Scrum stole Agile. It friggin' stole Agile. You know, 5 years later, people are equating, you know, oh, Agile Scrum, you know, Scrum. It ruined it. It destroyed the movement. You know, it stole the focus from those ideas and put it on the Scrum process. And then you talk to Scrum people today, and they say, oh, it's not a process. Yes, it is. It is a process. You know, it defines events, which are really activities. And it gives you latitude about how to do it, but it's a process. It defines these roles. They say, oh, they're not really roles. Yes, they are. And you know, and by the way, you know, the Scrum Master role has changed massively 8 times in the last, I think, 10 years. 8 times, like not little tweaks, like complete changes. Don't they know what they're doing? You know, this is about leadership and leading teams. This is not new stuff. Since we built the pyramids, people have been doing this. You know, you would expect that people writing the Scrum Guide would have a lot of experience, and they would get it kind of right the first time, because presumably they're late in their career and they've tried lots of things, and they're going to write down something that they know works. So why have they had to change it massively 8 times? You know, and so I think Scrum is the wrong thing to focus on. You know, the product owner role doesn't really make sense. You know, there's a lot of things wrong with that role. The Scrum Master role doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense. You know, it defines it's changed 8 times, like I said, hugely. And so, like at one point they were saying it's a servant leader. Servant leadership is a mode of leadership that's very important. It's not the whole picture. It's a particular leadership style that's important in the course of leading teams. If you're just a servant leader, you're not a good leader. You know, leaders also sometimes need to make decisions. They need to advocate. You know, they need to ask questions. You know, there's more to leadership than servant leadership. You know, and so the Scrum Master role is just wrong. You know, so I think you know, Scrum is the wrong thing to focus on with regard to agility. And it happened because they introduced cheap, fast certification, like in your first video. That's how they did it. It was marketing genius. And they basically stole Agile through a marketing trick of creating cheap, fast certification where anyone could get that and then have a 6-figure income.
Sorry for interrupting. You mentioned something very interesting. So Scrum, and I heard this a lot of times. Literally, I had a guy from Denmark that he was the CTO of a company. It's a partner company of Lasting Dynamics, and he was saying, you know, Scrum is definitely not agile. And he was so passionate about keeping saying it. But Scrum is the most used agile framework and methodology by large enterprises and by any other, company that is probably building software. So how is that possible? So why do they land immediately on Scrum? Yeah, it's probably because it's the most commercial one. It's the most known. What is your opinion?
Well, it's marketing. It's just like, Microsoft did not have the best operating system, but they took over the market. It's just marketing. It's position and timing and marketing. They were in the right place at the right time. They used the Agile movement because Scrum's been around since '93. They used the Agile movement to amplify their product. And they created the certification. They wrote a book about it. Just why did they write a book right after the Agile Manifesto? Why didn't they write one before that? Why did they introduce Scrum certification right after the Agile Manifesto? Why didn't they do it before that? They used the Agile movement to sell their product, and they retroactively claimed it as Agile, and even though it's not.
Okay. We are running a bit out of time, so probably we won't have time to watch all the content, but I definitely have a couple of others that I really want you to watch. So let's move to this one. The Agile tools do not make you agile. Tools and framework.
Agile frameworks will not make you agile. We have to finally understand that. Agile frameworks are just tools that allow already agile companies to overcome certain challenges they see. But just doing Scrum or Kanban or SAFe will never make you agile. You have to become agile to be able to make use of these tools. And once you're agile, you might not even need some of them.
Cyril.
Yes, there are so many concepts in a very short period of time between agile companies, agile framework. After you named 3 agile frameworks, and then you mentioned agile tools. So for me, it's like, spaghetti dish, and you can't even, where do I start? Matt, what is your view on the video?
I think it's an entertaining video. I think his content is actually accurate because, again, it comes down to, it's not about the tools, it's about the people in the organization and where are they moving from an agile perspective. What it doesn't answer is what is agile. And I've been asked that question in interviews. Other people have asked the question, and the best answer that I've seen for that is that agile is a mindset. So again, it's not a tool. It's not all these other things that are out there, but agile as a mindset, just as Cliff was talking about leadership, there's a lot of mindset that ties into your relationships with the people, your ability to lead, your ability to create an agile team and to do that. So agile is more about a mindset than it is about the tools. But I think what he laid out in that little entertaining video is exactly right. It's very easy for a company or an organization or even an individual to give lip service to agile and say, oh, we're using Jira for our team, therefore we're agile. We're doing a daily stand-up, therefore we're agile. I've heard that before too. And so the video is right on.
Like a checkbox exercise. Exactly. Exactly.
I'm gonna throw an open question out there. So since agile is a mindset, is it something that you have it or you don't? And if not, how do you build it? How do you build the mindset?
Okay. I waited.
Go for it, Cliff.
I have a tendency to take over. So just shout me down if you want to jump in. I won't be offended, but I'll try to be really brief. So we, in the Agile 2 group, and then afterwards, a company that I formed, we wondered about that. And what is an Agile mindset and what is an Agile culture? And so we reached out to a company called, well, first, we looked at all the different organizational culture models that we could find. And a particular one that got my attention was Nicole Forsgren's book mentions the Western model, which she uses in her research. But the one what we chose is developed by Human Synergistics about 50 years ago. It's a research-based. Dr. Robert Cook was one of the developers of it. They've used it with 30,000 organizations. They've benchmarked it against organizational performance. So it's a very robust, mature, respected, well understood model. And we worked with them. They took an interest because they, in Robert Cook's, actually I reached out to the head of their culture delivery, but Robert Cook, their CEO, became interested, and he contacted me, and we started collaborating about it. And because they wanted to understand culture versus agility. And according to him, the Agile 2 model was a much richer model of actual agility promoting behaviors. And so we actually were able to map the cultural precursors for these agility promoting behaviors that are defined by Agile 2. So we feel like we can say what an Agile culture is. And it's basically what their model describes as a constructive culture, which the Western model describes more or less the same as a generative culture. And it's when in the human synergistics model, there's humanistic encouraging behavior. There's they divide it in a lot of different dimensions, and so mindset means a lot of things. And like Matt said, it's about the way people think, their attitudes in different situations, and about how they interact with people. And so you have to learn about organizational culture in order to understand Agile mindset. You have to go you have to look at what does organizational culture mean, and what are the different ways of slicing that and understanding that. And if you do that, you then are in a good position to maybe shift the culture a little bit, because now you understand it and you can ask, why is it that way? And maybe we can change the incentives a little bit. Maybe we can teach the leaders to be better leaders, and so psychological safety is another thing that's an outcome, not a starting point. It's like saying, be healthy. You get psychological safety if leaders behave in certain ways. So you can shift the culture, but first you have to understand the culture. When you say Agile mindset, you have to think about what that really means through the lens of a cultural model, and then you are in a good position to change it.
Okay, let's move to some headlines. This one from Forbes says 12 reasons your digital transformation will fail. What I learned online is that actually this one is quite self-explanatory. If you were to go in for a heart surgery, buy a new car, or say your wedding vows to someone knowing that there was an 84% chance of failure, would you even bother? Like the point is that seems Forbes and other big companies, big four companies, McKinsey, etc., they recognized that there is a very high rate of failure for enterprises that are trying to drive digital transformation, that are starting digital transformation. So my question for you, Peter, is what is your suggestion to start a digital transformation, agile transformation, that are probably strongly connected? If you are an executive in a big company, what would you do first?
I think I get hung up on digital transformation as a big thing. I mean, to me, it means like it's not doing business the way that you've done it now. It's innovation, and you end up with something completely different. And so what I don't see in those little clips is, 84% fail. What's the definition of digital transformation in each one of those companies? I guess that would be where I would start, is what were they trying to do? And was it really digital transformation, or was it just a manual process made digital? Like going back to one of those videos, it's like, did we just buy Jira and now we're agile? Was that transformation, or was that, so I guess I'd be really curious to see what everyone was aiming at. And it seems like a really broad stroke to say that 84% fail. And that may be true, but on a case by case, company by company basis, what does that really mean? And just even getting down to like a team level, I think that I'd be really curious to hear what the definition of success was.
I think this is when you read all these titles, firstly, they always come from large consultancies who have an agenda to, of course, sell you a solution to be failure proof, of course. And I think the biggest problem here is we don't know how the initial expectations were set up. They say that failure rate, but when you launch an initiative of this size, usually multi-million or even more in dollars, you always have something left at the end. Even if you don't succeed in all your initial areas and expectations. So I think this is my takeaways. It's like how the initial expectations were set up, and how do you measure success? And we never know. Yeah. When you go into the details, usually it's via surveys, but
that's something that we will never know, of course. But when I read these points, I actually remember I always recall something similar happening in one of our projects before. So what I'm trying to say here is that let's imagine, I don't know, a bank that is developing a new mobile app for engaging more their users. Okay, that's a big problem for banks. Another can be a construction company that has been doing, or gold mining company that has been doing a lot of papers, to collect where their trucks are around, and now they want to centralize it into a system so that they do not spend more and that they can maintain their own assets, etc. So I read here, and this is the reason why I'm telling you, because I read here inability to translate into executive language. That is very clear. It's stating it very clearly. And then a lack of control over external vendors. I can give you tons of examples in which I saw this happening. The number 7, I used to call it multi-vendor management madness. While instead the number 6, it's something that the way I see it is group CEO or something like that is taking decisions in a pretty waterfall way, and then aims to innovate, introducing Agile into the tech team, but then wants everything to be done in 4 weeks, regardless the challenges and the tech challenges, etc. So the question was literally, did you, or maybe I can change it, did you see this happening anywhere else? Do you have any concrete example that we can analyze together?
I don't have a concrete example that I can share comfortably, but I think on that, I forget which one it is, but it was the number 6, the executive language one that you're on right there. I think it flows the other way as well. So inability to translate into executive language. I think there's the executive's inability to translate it into what it means for the rest of the company. So if you're talking digital transformation at 100,000 employee company, and you're basically telling not everybody, but a lot of people that the way that you work now is going to change. The way that you do things is potentially going to change, and it'll be revolutionary, and it's going to change everything. We're going to have, the company's going to do great because of this. But I've spoken to, just doing customer research calls, spoken to people after implementing certain tools, like Agile tools, like Jira, for example, and have been told, like, but we like it this way. Like, you're given a tool from the executives, say, we're buying this, you're going to use this tool now, here we go. And it's all, rah, this is going to be fantastic. But then it's like they didn't even talk to their team. And now I'm having that conversation with a customer to understand, how are you using this? And they're fighting it because they weren't interested in the first place. This wasn't my initiative. I don't care about transforming. you know, like this is my job.
Extremely
I get paid. You know, it doesn't matter to me if the stock price triples. Wonderful, my salary doesn't triple. So, but now I enjoy my job less. So, what do I care? So I think there's a whole lot of dynamics to this, and that may go back to why these things fail. It's just there might be teams of people that just don't want to. Oh, there, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's extremely interesting and actually true. Yeah, definitely executives have a bigger picture, you know, of everything, and it's always hard, you know. It goes both ways around for sure. This one is manage morale, not metrics, for more effective engineering teams. Management is obsessed with measuring everything. I actually have quite of an interesting topic here. What happens in Scrum is that you want to appreciate you want to collect a bunch of data so that then you can draw a bunch of charts, and then you can understand what is the performance of the team. And most of the time, this is done on the paper. It's not taking in account a lot of variables that can happen in a team. So how do you see this topic? I do understand that for a company, it's important to understand if a team is performing or not. But can we collect data about a bunch of people and then use it to measure their performance? Is that true? Is it the way to do it? The right way to do it?
Depends on how many Steves you have on your team, I think.
You know, this gets in, is this an open question? It could be any of us. I mean, you know, it gets to the subject of, you know, management by objective and OKRs and all those kinds of things. And, you know, there's also a concept of the one metric that matters. And a very important thing about that is that it changes over time. It depends where you are in the life cycle of developing something and improving something. The metric that matters changes from week to week, you know, and in terms of the team performance, it's really kind of the wrong thing to focus on. You know, it's a symptom of it's kind of like, you know, I like to call the 90s the methodology craze, you know, because before the 90s, projects often didn't have methodologies. It's like they put a project manager in charge and they did whatever they thought worked, you know, and sometimes it was very organized and sometimes it wasn't. And during the 90s, you saw the rise of PMI, and then you started seeing, you know, more formal methodologies. Every company developed its methodology. And what happened, and unintended consequences, you ended up with the role of the lead or the manager or the project manager. That role shifted. It shifted from being a very involved participative role to being a check the box, look at the documents role, and looking at the charts, you know, looking at the status reports. It became an uninvolved role. And, you know, what actually works is when leaders go out and do gumbo, when they actually talk to people. And so if you ask someone a team lead or a division lead or whatever, you ask them on any given day, what are the things people are working on today that really matter? They should know without looking at any kind of report or chart. They shouldn't have to look at the dashboard. They should already know. And they should know what is that metric that matters today. You know, so it really, and if you do that, you don't need to worry about performance of teams. That looking at performance of teams is like trying to manage it remotely. It's like treating people like a fluid in a valve. You know, you have to be more issue focused, and that's a leadership style. And in highly agile companies, we see that. We see leaders who are very issue focused, who know what's going on every day, and they don't have to look at reports and team performance measurements. They know what everyone's doing, and they know what they're struggling with, and they know which issues people need help with. Okay, this they're stuck on this. Let's bring people into a room and figure out what we're going to try to solve that. Or they've got it, leave them alone. I'll check back tomorrow. You know, they know what's happening.
Okay, this is actually touching the last topic. So this one is saying sprint reviews and retrospectives in a hybrid work setting. When companies have a mix of employees at home and in the office, it's vital that important agile ceremonies bring everyone together. Peter, you started this podcast by mentioning that literally to make marketing and tech team communicate more, you just moved the desk, and I loved it. What is the approach of bigger companies like Atlassian to have an hybrid, setup where you have some employees in the office and some others from remote? How can tools leverage this, and eventually which other practices you might decide to follow?
Yeah, I honestly, I miss being in an office sometimes. I've been fully remote for a number of years now. And so that case that you mentioned where we actually we picked ourselves up and we sat next to our teammates, you don't have that luxury when it's remote. And my experience so far, when you have a mix of people that are in the office together and people that are remote, is that the remote still, even if there's a very big effort to bring everyone together, even for agile ceremonies or team ceremonies, you still end up sort of leaving people out a little bit. I think that's just the nature of remote work. I've seen teams, and I've been on teams that try to do this asynchronously, and I don't see as much value come out of that, because you miss that sort of that bouncing between people. Where I've seen this work well in doing this hybrid thing is, it goes back to what Cliff has been talking about a lot, is leadership, and this keeps coming to mind throughout this conversation, is the leaders that I've worked with, that they're not the ones that are managing by spreadsheets and dashboards. They're the ones that they make it their job to go and talk to everybody. So if for example, me being in Australia, I'm not making a US time zone and a stand up there, I'm still looped in, excuse me. And this is Daniel at Atlassian, I think did a fantastic job of making sure that he understood what everyone was working on and what the priorities were. And he was the one that sort of said, you need to talk to Mary, you need to talk to Teresa, like that's probably something that's going to block what Max is working on. What Max told me yesterday is probably going to impact you. And so that solved a lot of the problems, or the perceived problems, that, and it was just a really strong leader. And I think it's incumbent on that role to do that. And so it's a lot of work, and it's probably a heavy lift, but that to me stood out as a really effective way of managing a team when you have some people co-located and some not. It's a hard problem to solve for, but if you get the right person in it, it seems to work. But that's the hardest part, right? You go back to the first video where it's like, hey, it's easy to become a Scrum Master. Why not? Like just walk in off the street and you can do this too. But yeah, I think you need to hire those people and be on the lookout for them. So like from the exec level, you need to be watching for those managers and those leaders that can do the small things, like run these meetings and still have everyone come along and feel like they're part of the team.
Makes me feel better. Seems like we are doing it right. We are also having a 50-50 setup, and we add the people in the team that facilitate, the conversation, the communication, and that is something that seems to work. But what I have a funny story. One time I was interviewing a tech lead, and and I told him, I'm really sorry, but this position is meant to be in office, and because we have other positions from remote, but this one is because we need someone in office, because we had to, to extend the in-office team. And he told me, yeah, well, I'm sorry, but I was looking for a company that could be a little more mature from this perspective. And I was feeling so bad, saying, oh, wow. Anyway, okay, very last one for you, Matt. Shuari, have you ever been in touch with this methodology? It's coming from martial arts actually, and explains a bit the path to become a master, starting as a novice, as an apprentice. What do you think about it? Have you been using it, and do you suggest it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I first got introduced to this concept after I was in martial arts. I used to do Taekwondo years ago with my son. And before that, some Shotokan and some different martial arts. But I had never heard of this until I got into Agile in the last 20 years. And this I think about all the time. Since I was first introduced to this many years ago, I think it's an excellent concept to think about from a learning and a learning path perspective. Because in the beginning, you talked about earlier, Michelle, like by the book, Scrum, right? That's the shoe. The shoe is the beginning piece when you're doing everything by the book. And that's, like you said, that's where you need to start. You need to start with something. You need to start with some basic rules. And then you move into the ha, then you move into the re over time. But it's a progression. And everybody's at different places. One important aspect of this, you mentioned martial arts, and this is where it comes from, is it's really important to align with a leader, which in this case, it could be an Agile leader in the company, it could be an Agile coach, it could be a transformation lead, whoever it is. But it's really important to align with, in martial arts, you might call it a sensei, right? Align with someone who you respect and trust to lead you in the direction that you want to go, because nobody's path through Shuha-Ri is ever the same. No team's path is ever the same. So you want to meet individuals and teams where they're at. And then again, if you have a trusted leader with good integrity, they will lead them down the path through this. So I think it's a great example. There's a lot of analogies to make with martial arts and learning how to drive and all these different things you can bring in. But it's a great way to think about learning Agile, and also remind you that this is not an overnight thing. You don't become the world's best Scrum Master or the world's most Agile company, in a day. There's a process. It takes time.
Yeah, it takes time. And, most of the people nowadays, especially in the IT industry, want everything and immediately, everything and now, and instead, as every profession, the path for mastering a certain area is always not necessarily a long one, but a tough one. It requires, a lot of commitment and energy. Okay, so I think we arrived to the end of this episode, and I want to thank you all for being here with us. It took a little longer, so thank you very much for being here with us. Again, Cliff, Peter, and Matt. I want to remember to our audience that you can find our guests on our website and in the section dedicated to the podcast. So please follow them on LinkedIn and on the other social media platforms. I also want to thank you, Cyril, for being here with us again today, and Frank, always here next to me in the studio. Don't miss the next episode. The next episode is about AI, so everyone is waiting for that. And again, thank you, everyone. Thank you again for coming, and see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.